The Plein Air Easton Podcast is brought to you by the Avalon Foundation, enriching the lives of those on the Eastern Shore of Maryland through the arts. Visit avalonfoundation.org for details on events, performances, and educational programming offered throughout the year.
Do you like the podcast you've listened to?
Yes, when I found out I got in this year, I was like, you know what? I need to find out much more about this. So I'm a girl who likes to do research. So I dived into all the podcasts to listen to what people had to say, what morsels of wisdom they had for me.
Did you get anything out of them?
Nah, just kidding.
At least she's honest.
Hello, everyone. This is Tim Wagon from the Plein Air Easton Podcast, and I am with...
Hi, I'm Jess Bellis. I'm also with the Plein Air Easton Podcast.
Jess Bellis with the Plein Air Easton Podcast. Talking about dedication and living up to your word. She had some things to say about that as far as what she did during Plein Air, which was really pretty crazy. You know, in the middle of Plein Air Easton. I mean, that was pretty wild.
Spoiler alert, we're not going to tell you.
We're not going to tell you.
But I do think that a takeaway that is sort of a theme from some of our last podcasts is, you can start anytime.
Right.
To follow your passions. And, she speaks at the very end of this podcast with some really humble and inspiring gratitude, I think, which is a good reminder for us all in this time of Thanksgiving to stop and take sort of note that when you're given the opportunities to do the things you love or to explore things that bring you joy, lean in.
And don't believe everybody who tells you that you suck.
Right. Don't believe it. Do not believe it, but do enjoy this podcast. And like us and give us good reviews and stuff too. Tell your friends. Share, and enjoy.
Sign up for Plein Air Easton 2023. Thank you. We are talking with May. May, how do you pronounce your last name?
Klisch.
Klisch.
Klisch. Like, as my husband says, the sound of opening a bottle of beer.
Klisch. Very nice.
And he's a beer. He's a brewer, so
I know she brought us some of her fantastic product. I don't know if you got to sample any.
I did not.
He's got some good beers.
May, I don't know who you are. I don't even recall seeing you or the Plein Air thing. But then I heard that you were handing out free beers to everybody.
Well, then somebody said, "Well, why don't you sponsor the beer next year?" I'm like,
yeah. What's the name?
Wait. Then she's like, no, I see how much they drink at Plein Air Easton, and that would be way too rich for our blood.
What kind of beer? What kind of beer is it? I mean, this is Wisconsin brewing. This is the bottling company.
My husband started this brewery 35 years ago in Milwaukee when he was a little micro. Uh-huh. Now we're a regional craft brewery. So if you look at lakefrontbrewery.com, you can see the whole lineup. And coming right up, actually,
you didn't get to hear it, but Nick, our producer, went woo in the background. So I guess he's a really big. He's a sleeper fan. He didn't really know that this is your alter ego. May, are you involved in the business too, or is it it's your husband's gig?
I figured I should give him some room to breathe. So as they say, a man needs some place to be his castle, and that's where he needs to go.
Is that his full time? He's the owner. Yeah. He's the brewer. Is he the brewer too?
He's the owner. He started brewing, but then now he's the owner. I think he said, well, before the pandemic, I think we were close to 140 employees.
Wow.
But
there you go.
We had to roll
of course,
back a little bit, and then now we're building up again, and it's more a matter of trying to hire people because nobody is available anymore.
No, I think that's an industry that everybody is kind of facing. But as fascinated as we are about beer and your husband and Great Fall, we'll bring it back around to you, May. And I always like to start with where did you come from, and did you come out of the womb an artist, or is it something give me your origin story for those comic book readers out there?
Oh my God!
Take me a path.
How many days do I have to tell the story? I'll condense it.
Leave the
I'm
highlights.
From Singapore. I'm from Singapore originally, and I didn't come out of the womb an artist, although the first 16 years of my life, I loved art. I drew everything from bugs to stick figures before I could, before I knew letters. It was like a caveman, just all of that. And then when I went to secondary school, I was, how you have a friend group and somebody is like, oh, she's the softball girl, she's the netball girl, she's the choir girl. I was the artist, And so
does the Singapore culture value art? Was it in your education, or is it like sort of secondary to academics? I just am not very familiar.
Oh yeah, Singapore is the original STEM, I think.
Got
it. So at that time in my life, no, which was probably a good thing, because I when I took my Cambridge O levels at 16, I was thinking I would ace art because I'm the artist in the group. Well, I failed 2 subjects. One of them was Chinese and the other one was art. Who fails art? Nobody fails art. And so it was kind of an embarrassing thing and humiliating. But, there I was at 16. And not that I had visions of becoming an artist as a career, but I thought this was my thing. And so I was so messed up and frustrated, I threw away all my art supplies. I never looked at it again until 6 years ago.
What? So another big, a frustrating time out. You said, the universe has said this is not for me. I need to follow a different path. So what did you do in that time period?
In that time period? Again, how many days do you have?
The highlights, May. Come on.
So, okay, at 16, I went for a year of secretarial school, and then not following the path of my siblings and going to university, I thought that I would go out and meet the world, and I started working at 17 for a semiconductor company in Singapore, sort of the precursor to, a lot of the electronics in the world that runs our entire world now. So I was in semiconductors for a year, and then I went on to a 4-year PR job, and then I went on to being the PR manager at the zoo in Singapore.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, this is just part of my checkered past, so bear with me. And then I thought, this could be the end of the road because I don't have a tertiary education. And in Singapore, it's all about paper. So I thought, okay, fine. I'm going to pursue a university degree. At first, I had this dream come up again. So I applied to the San Francisco Art Institute for some reason. I actually got in, and then I was too chicken. And I thought, no, you're not an artist, right? That's the message that you got before. You're not an artist. So I set that aside, and then I reapplied to business school. So I got into the University of Hawaii and did the 4-year travel industry management program.
And were you still sort of sketching and doodling during this time, or you really just tamped it all down? You disassociated?
I think I dared to like art on the side, but not throw myself into say, I'm going to pursue art. So, and actually when I applied to the SFAI, I applied for filmmaking because I was afraid of, because you've been told you're not an artist, you're not a visual artist. So, you go for something else. So I applied for filmmaking, got in, and then I chickened out. Then I did my 4-year degree in 3 years in Hawaii, and I graduated with a degree in business, and went on to hotel management in San Francisco for 3 years. Went into some other business venture, and then finally ended up working for a subsidiary of Xerox, at which time it was like year 10 in San Francisco. And I thought, well, I could go into communications, maybe go into broadcast. And so I applied, and the headhunter I was working with moved to the cable industry at the time was beginning. in the early 80s. And so she said, why don't you think about cable narrowcasting, not broadcasting? And so that is what brought me to what I thought would be 1 year in Wisconsin. You get and you meet the person, and then you say, what are the chances you move your business, your brewery to either coast? I'm going to just move to the East Coast or back to the West Coast. And he's like, not a chance. I'm trying to bring craft brewery back to Milwaukee. I'm like, Urgh. So let's see. 28 years later, I'm still here. And his brewery is growing strong, and his friends are grateful he never listened to me. To try to move him.
Have you grown to like Wisconsin? I guess you don't want to. That's probably something you don't want to talk about, right? You can't disclose.
No. I should. Have I grown to love Wisconsin? I will say that the first year was pretty miserable. I didn't like my job very much. It was government relations, somebody difficult in my work surroundings, but in that year that I met him, I always say that Russ turned Wisconsin or Milwaukee on its face for me. I got to see a side of Milwaukee that I enjoyed, and it was like, so there's this white stuff around, and it's really bitterly cold. All right, fine. We'll deal with it like everything else. But then I got to know the place, and I'll honestly say that now that I've had two girls who are all grown, and we live in Shorewood, and I've been able to give them a childhood similar to the one I had in Singapore. Sidewalks, safe to walk to school. No, that's not true. I didn't walk to school. I had a private taxi take me to school. But it is a place that's so safe for kids to grow up. And they still keep coming back here from San Francisco, and they are like, we love this place. I think they could see their kids growing up here. So I was able to give them that piece of childhood that I grew up with, that security, So in that respect, yes, Shorewood, Wisconsin, it's the place. It's the bomb.
Come raise your family in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Don't raise our real estate prices, please.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah. So once you got settled, was it when your girls were small that you found yourself jumping back into art? Was it when they got out of the house and you didn't have to be consumed by career and motherhood? Like, tell me about picking up that paintbrush again and what it took.
Yeah, it's bizarre. So I have this friend who, until a year ago, was a very high-powered CEO of one of the big organizations here in Milwaukee, and I'd known her through other things. And when I was running the Lighthouse for 10 years, this was like my last year running the Lighthouse that was converted into a museum, an 1888 lighthouse. And she had put together a show of her watercolors. And so she held her fundraiser here at the Lighthouse, and I got to talking to her, and I said, so I didn't know this other side to you. She goes, oh yeah, 6 months ago, her name's Julia Taylor, by the way. 6 months ago, I took a 3-day course in Florida with this British artist, and I started painting, and then I got 35 works here, and here I'm doing a show, and I was like, that's mind blowing, So I thought to myself, you're so chicken. Get back into it. So that Christmas 6 years ago, I bought myself, the watercolor paper, brushes, and paints. And I borrowed her book from this British artist. And I started painting my first bird. And it didn't suck. And I went on. I painted, I think, a koala bear and more birds. And then within 6 months, I had enough confidence to say, I might want to pursue this a little bit. So this was almost 50 years, 45 years after I said goodbye to art. I came around again, and I sort of rekindled my love for it. So it was watercolor for a while. And then Plein Air in Cedarburg in Wisconsin happened. And so, okay, I'll participate in that.
And did you know what that was? Like, I'm always like a little bit surprised. Like, you know, you were like, you're like, wait, I bring my stuff outside. Like, how did that? Yeah. Did you have a friend who said, "May, come and do this"? Like, how did that work?
No, I heard about that, and I thought, well, you know, I can give it a try. It's 30 miles away, you know, and Cedarburg is a lovely community. I've always loved it. I belong to the Artist Guild there now, but they had the previous year's winner come back to teach a class. So I thought, I can do that. I can do that for 3 days and learn about how to paint plein air. And then I'm going to enter the competition.
Just do it.
Just do it. And it's turned out Steve Patrick was like one of the best teachers. And then it turned out he's the one watercolorist that I know that won the plein air in Cedarburg the previous year. So being that great teacher he was, you know, he gave us all the bones. And so I was painting happily. And then when we went to that evening, just like in Easton, and you saw everybody's work there, you walked around and you're like, oh, okay. Everybody be like, oh, what's your work? And so those watercolors there. And they're like, oh, nice. Yeah, okay, now let's look at the oils. You know, that's where the serious stuff is. I was like, what is that about? You know, I felt a little bit kind of swept aside. So then I said, okay, I think I need to level the playing field. So then I asked another friend about an oil painter, how and she set me up with her teacher. So I went to this Russian who taught us how to paint oils. That's how I got into oils. And that was a year and a half later. And then the pandemic.
Did you follow, like, I feel like I saw mostly oil work from you in Easton, but I guess you painted both. Do you feel equally connected to both mediums?
I've decided that for Plein Air Easton, that oils needed to come to the forefront. And actually by that time I had discovered water mixable oils. So I painted with Cobra oils, and that was comfortable for me. So I could use a little bit of my watercolor background to start off and not be intimidated by the washes. And then I laid into the oils. But I also had, in the interim during the pandemic, I'd taken acrylics and in abstracts. And so that gave me a different way to treat oil too, you know, sweeping it, making crazy backgrounds.
If our listeners don't know May, like looking up some of her work, I would say that you do not fit the mold of some of the traditional plein air painters. Like, talk to me a little bit about that, and like, does that feel like adversity? Like, have you had? We've certainly had conversations with other sort of more abstract plein air painters. Like, what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, I didn't intentionally go into Easton saying I'm going to paint as abstractly as I can. I actually didn't. What happened was, you know, I spoke to, once I knew I gotten in, and actually the way I got in was because I heard Patrick Lee in a podcast talk about his experience and how he found out what Plein Air Easton was. And so that was what triggered me to understand that this thing existed.
So did you know Patrick Lee's work, or you were just like listening to some random podcast and he was talking like?
It was because of this abstract course I was taking that led me to discover John Seed and disruptive realism, and from there hopped over, you know, to Patrick Lee. And when I listened to him and he introduced the idea of Plein Air Easton, I decided to follow that route, and that's when I started listening to your podcast. Then and then a whole slew. And once I knew before I knew I got in, I actually took a plein air class with Mark Anderson, who joined me this year. Mm-hmm. And when I found out we both got in this year, I was like, Mark, bring it home for Wisconsin, you know, he's my guy. And he said, stop, don't jinx it.
I love it.
Anyway, so then I said, Mark, who's your guru? Who's your Plein Air guru? He said, Mark Boges. So I took Mark Boges' workshop out in Arizona this year, and I asked him. So I quizzed him, and then at the Plein Air convention in Santa Fe, I quizzed Charlie Hunter, Susie Parker, Kathleen Hudson, Kevin McPherson.
Oh my gosh, all these quizzes. So tell me what they said about Plein Air Easton. Give me the summary. Yeah. They said it's too hot.
They were like, yeah, that's what everybody said. It's going to be hot. And I'm like, okay, I get that. Aside from that, they're like, you're going to have a good time. You're going to find a cadre of people who are really great. And, they said great things about you guys as organizers, that you'll never be wanting. You'll never be tripping over anything. Whatever you need, you will find. And so I was like, okay, that's good. This hand-holding is good. And it was my now buddy Joe Gerzak at the Blick booth at Santa Fe's Plein Air Convention. And he said, I don't care what everybody else told you, just be yourself. And I'm like, oh, phew, okay.
I love that. That's very Joe too. I think that he is himself, and he has been. He is another person who I think, he's one of our grand prize winners, and I don't think that his style or art is very in the box either.
Yeah, and so because I won a small prize in the Cedarbrook Plein Air with an abstracted painting of their art museum, and that won this tiny second prize of one of the categories. I then got the courage to apply to Plein Air, thinking that, well, I'll apply for about 5-6 years, and they'll finally notice me and say, okay, let's get rid of this bug. Let's let her in. I didn't know how. I didn't know how this worked. I just thought if you bug them enough and you show up at the door like a squirrel every day, they'll finally throw you a nut. So
as a note, some festivals actually I think do work that way, and ours is like a blind jury, and who knows?
Who knows? I had no clue. So I was like, I'm going to start applying, and then 5-6 years they'll say yes. So imagine my surprise when I got in the first time, and actually it was kind of it put me in a quandary because. After I applied, I had invited this British artist over who was the landscape artist of the year, the Sky Arts thing from Great Britain, and I followed him and I loved him, and I finally got a hold of him, and he said he was going to come visit Chicago. So I said, "Oh, come up to Milwaukee. We're 90 miles north." And he said, "Yeah, okay, great." And he set the dates, and I was like, "Okay," and that was right in the middle of Plein Air Easton. Do you remember?
I do. So this is something, Tim, who's gone mute in this conversation. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe he needs a rest or something. I don't know. But May came to Plein Air Easton, knocked out some quick paintings, flew back home to Milwaukee. She turned in her 2 competition works the third day, bounced back out in her first year, then flew back for the award ceremony, and she won an award. For the people who are busting their butts for days, I don't.
I'm sorry.
Is it luck? Is it good karma? I don't know. No, I don't apologize. I think for your first year you performed fantastic. Your sales were strong. I think your experience, but I think you're pretty exhausted by the end of the week, but not necessarily because of the festival, but because of what you had pushed yourself through.
Yeah, I made a commitment to Tom, and I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be there. He's like, okay, thanks. But he was a bit are you crazy? But because I scheduled 2 talks, one here in Milwaukee and one in Cedarbrook, with the 2 guilds that I belong to. And I was like, I'm not going to let them down. I'm not. And I'm hosting Tom in my house. And here's my husband going, what? What's happening? And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to come back. And then my plane landed at 12. I picked him up from the train station at 1. We had the talk at 5. We had dinner. The next morning, we do a quick walkabout and show him the brewery, and it takes a tour. And then we go up to Cedarbrook. He does the talk there. we have a quick dinner, and then I said, okay, I'm on the 7 a.m. plane back. So my friend is going to take care of you and shuttle you to the station so you can get back to Chicago. And then my husband and I get on the plane at 7 a.m., fly back to Easton, and we're at the dinner that night.
Right.
You know,
the awards dinner.
Yeah, the awards. Yeah. Actually, it wasn't the awards. It was the one where your spouse is allowed.
Oh, yeah, the night before. The night before. You're right. It was like the VIP preview.
Yeah, right. And so I got in, and then
no, she came straight from the airport. She had to change into better clothes in the bathroom because it was like she just flew in, and boy, were her arms tired. So we're gonna take a quick break, May, and we'll come back, and then Tim, I've seen him jotting notes. He's gonna ask you a bunch of rapid fire, exciting questions.
Okay.
So we'll be back with May in just a moment.
Hey everyone, producer of the podcast, Nick Richards here. We're so glad you've been enjoying our podcasts. We put a lot of love into creating them in hopes of building a more robust community around our festival. If you're interested in even more Plein Air Easton material, boy oh boy do I have news for you. If you head over to the Plein Air Easton YouTube channel, youtube.com/Plein Air Easton, you'll find live streams of our festival events, including this year's awards ceremony, time-lapse videos of plein air artists creating their beautiful masterpieces, as well as episodes of the podcast. We also have a series of instructional videos from competition artists and alumni, including Lori Putnam, Paul Botcham, Susan Lin, Beth Bathe, Joe Giersick, and Master Joe Vuong. For $50, you can watch one of our incredible artists explain their techniques and artistic philosophies step by step. With views of the artist, the canvas, the palette, and the subject, you'll be able to observe the entire process. And your purchase includes unlimited replays so you can watch the lesson over and over again. Later this year, we will be releasing more instructional videos with Thomas Bucci, Robert J. Simone, and Julie Riker. To check them out, visit vimeo.com/Avalon Foundation/VOD_pages. That's vimeo.com/Avalon Foundation/VOD_pages. All this additional content can keep you connected to the artists and offerings of the event, and we hope to see you next summer at Plein Air Easton.
Welcome back to Plein Air Easton. We are talking here with May Klisch, the sound of a beer can opening. May, have you ever drank Old Milwaukee?
Believe it or not, I didn't tell you this earlier, but I am not a beer drinker. I will actually eat my beer.
What does that mean, man?
Beer dinners.
What's that?
I will go to beer dinners, or I will cook with beer.
Uh-huh.
I will do a tasting. I'll taste the beer, and then I'll hand the rest to my husband, who happily helps. And then I'm the designated driver. So there you go.
This part of the interview sponsored by Lakefront Brewery out of Milwaukee.
We'll be sending him a sponsorship agreement.
Yeah, right. Send it over.
What do you drink? Wine, May? You drink wine or whiskey, or what do you drink? Nothing.
You know what? I used to. When I lived in San Francisco, I had the Coit liquor store right close to me, and I would go there and pick up all these fabulous wines, and that was my drink. And then I came to Milwaukee. I had kids. I gave up wine and alcohol for pregnancy, and I never went back to it. And you know what? I'm a cheap date, so I will be very happy if you buy me a Coke or a Pepsi.
Wait, you're in the Midwest. Wouldn't you call that a pop?
Yes. Well, I'm not born in the Midwest.
Great,
so
good point.
Still call it a
good
soda.
Point. No, that's
a pop.
My cousins who live in Chicago are always, if I'm like, they're like, oh, you sound so silly when you say soda. Soda.
Give me a pop.
Like, what are you even talking about with your soda?
Yes, but we still do drink out of the bubbler. So
there you go.
All right, I'm going to recap the first half of this interview for some people who were listening. Just a couple of questions I wanted to throw in there. May, why did you go to school in a private taxi?
Okay, so in Singapore, just tiny little island, our secondary school was about maybe 15, 20 miles away. There was no busing system. And if you have multiple kids in the same area, you just hired a private taxi, and it was very inexpensive. So this guy would come and pick up 6 kids, stuff them in the car, no car seats, and then zoom, and you're there, and then you get picked up. And I'll tell you this fun incident. Before Singapore had a great irrigation system, we had terrible floods. So all 6 of us were in this private taxi, and we were at this point.
Are these your siblings, or are they like just random neighborhood kids?
Random neighborhood
Very
kids.
Small bus.
No, actually, it was a Mercedes taxi, but an old Mercedes taxi. And so we were at this hill, and we were like looking down. There's floods everywhere, but it's one road, one short, maybe 6-block road to my school. Mm-hmm. And this is Singapore kids versus other kids, right? Singapore kids are like, no, you have to take us to school because we have the math exam today. You must, otherwise we'll fail. So all 6 of us are screaming like somebody has geography or whatever. So we forced this poor taxi guy to go into the water, and then we're going along, and then suddenly the engine cuts, and then the taxi bobs up, and we're now a boat. And we still insisted that all the kids on the side of the road and the people who came to help us would push the taxi towards the school so we could go and take our darn exams, which of course never happened. And we had to be lifted by army truck back to our homes about 6 hours later. But yeah, that's
wow.
That is Singapore students versus,
Yeah, I can 100% guarantee that my children would not push through a flood to go take a test.
No, I was gonna have.
What about your girls, May? Would they have pushed through a flood? No.
I told them that story, and I was like, never do that. You're if it's 8 inches of water, you have my permission to turn back. No.
Okay, next question. Do you hate the person who told you were not an artist?
No. The person who marked my papers was in Cambridge in the UK. In Singapore at that time, we didn't mark our own papers. We didn't grade our own papers. They sent everything, shipped it off to England, and somebody at Cambridge, I don't know who, marked our papers, and they came back. And I remember that there was 3 things. You had to do a still life, an object. I painted a prawn, and I must have added some color to the prawn, which was probably not colorful. Imaginative composition, and I did it of the night market in Singapore. And then I think it was a graphic piece, so a repetitive pattern. And I thought I did great. I came out of the exam, room each time, and I'm like, I killed it. Yes, I rock, And then you get the results, and it's like, you failed that. And I don't just mean a Singapore F or a Chinese F. In other words, an Asian F. I don't mean like I got A-. I mean, I failed. I totally failed. So it was devastating, I would have been okay with an A- or a B. I would not have taken that as an Asian F. But no, it was outright you failed. So
okay, disputed realism. What is it?
Disruptive.
Disruptive realism. What is it?
It is. I think that is a phrase that was coined by somebody who worked with John Seed, the author of that book. He saw what he thought is a movement. He's on to his 2nd book now, and it is how artists, according to his perception, seem to have perceived a shift in their reality, whether it is time, memory, or physicality. It's very nebulous. And it's not like Impressionism and another ism where it's pretty defined. And I do believe that some artists whom we call, disrupted artists, fight that term, that label. They don't really care to be called that at all. They're just doing their art. But, you have Gay Jobdenbrow, you have Patrick Lee, who always speaks about, when he paints something, it also might include the memory. And so it slides off of the realism platform. So
do you feel like that's still plein air painting? I mean, like, this is something that is like controversial in the plein air world, do you feel like once you've sort of crossed over and you are incorporating memory, or you're adding perhaps a lot to a composition that isn't right before you, do you think that there is a place where it's no longer a plein air painting?
Yeah, that's I realized that I could probably have been the controversy this year, as the previous year was, can you paint inside with a model? I realized that when Julia Marciari Alexander said, a lot of you might have been wondering why I picked this. And I picked that apart, and I thought, I think I served a purpose in asking the question that you're now posing, my work there. And I think that when I was painting that, I was painting the realistic pieces, but there was this huge field that I was painting the emotional part of it. That was what I was feeling from what I was seeing. And that painting specifically, I felt like I wanted to feel what the farmers were feeling, because I actually went into the farm to talk to the farmer to say, could I paint your farm feel and your buildings? And he really actually thought I was wanting to paint. And I had to clarify that.
It's like a theme, right?
Yeah, it is theme. But I said, okay, I'm going to be over there painting it
on a canvas, right?
And kind of canvas. And he said, oh yeah, sure. And he told me a little bit about his family. It's just me and my dad, and we're doing this. And I could see the disrepair in the farm buildings. I could have been there and painted all of that, all the things that needed to be done. And I could see there was a bit of a struggle, and maybe more struggle than he wanted to let on. But, in that conversation, I got that. And just driving around Easton, I felt that weight. And, when I was painting in Cedarburg, I actually one year painted completely out of a farm. And I saw them every day for a week. Mm-hmm. And I asked them about their lives. And, it's a really hard life, even with, modern machinery. So I felt the connection to the farmers here, and to this particular family that I was talking to. I felt the weight. I felt the dragging down. And so I was like, I can paint another building or buildings, or I could feel the weight that I'm feeling on their behalf. So is that more valid than, or less valid than the paint peeling off from the walls of the barn? Or is that coming off and the feeling is there in another section of the painting?
Well, and I guess if you're interpreting plein air painting as being in the moment, then capturing the emotions and feelings of the moment preserves the same authenticity that comes from doing something in the moment versus sitting in your studio and pulling something from your mind and just creating a studio work that maybe would be the opposite of plein air painting. But, not that you can't be having sensory recall or recalling how you felt in a space. Like the fact that it might have been somewhat abstracted or additive, came from the emotions that you were feeling, which were indeed in that moment.
Yeah. I first of all, Julia was not wrong that, perhaps I was melting along with it, but it really, as much as I could, stand in the shade, wear my hat. I had a neck fan. I don't know if you recall that.
I do. It was I would not say it was very stylish, but it did serve the purpose, I think.
Yes. And I stuffed tiny frozen bottles of water everywhere that it could go. Let me just say that.
Just tuck them all in.
Let's tuck it in wherever you have strong enough garments to hold it. Yeah. So, but
that's like an insider tip.
Yeah.
Truly inside.
Deep inside, yes.
Yeah, deep inside. I just feel like it's an interpretive thing. Of course, was I surprised? Yes. I mean, I really wanted to do the painting I wanted to do. That's why I didn't expect to win anything. I wasn't even hoping. It wasn't even on my radar. I just thought, this is how I feel. This is how I'm going to paint. A couple of other people had said, just go paint a pretty picture. Don't try to be too artsy. Just paint a pretty picture. And I'm like, I could do that. Or
I'm glad you listened to Joe instead, and that you were yourself. And I think that people do smell authenticity, and that is where they like it when it feels real and authentic. And I think that is why your work performed really well this past year.
Well, it's also a broadening of the plein air sort of thing. If plein air was done because they wanted to go outside and the paints wouldn't dry up, so they would go and were able to paint outside for their studies rather than recalling from memory, right? And that was a long time ago, and that certainly needs to be respected. But it's 2022, and everything is changing, and there's no reason. I mean, I just looked at your work on the website, and it is really, really cool stuff.
Thank you.
And from the surfers to the very first image that you see, which I think is some sort of, maybe it's a house or a boat, but then there's this swirl that you throw in, and not all the time, but you see it more than once or variations of it. And I guess is that the disruptive? That's probably not the disruptive. What is that? Or is that?
I guess
because your portraits are extremely different too.
It's abstracted realism because I add the element of what I feel in the moment when I'm making that. When I can do realism. I mean, you see my portraiture.
Yeah, you can see the portraits, and they're very interesting too. I mean, and there's. If you look at her work, and I suggest going on there if you're listening to take a look at her work, because you'll see a portrait of Ruth Bader Ginsburg that is almost sort of puzzle or mosaic, and then there's a very sort of soft image of another girl, another portrait that is the next person. So I guess you're proving that you can do a lot of styles, but there's no melting in the portrait of the younger girl, the teen girl that you do.
No, and it's just when you're in that moment and you're painting. I have my gamut of tools is wide. I have a lot of different tools that I use and techniques, So it just depends on what takes me in the moment, and if I felt like I did when I painted that melting piece, that applied. In the tiny show, I did the one of the boat with the water that goes like down. So that was a little sweep. So it could have been on the surface where you see the, reflection, or it could have been the depth. But that's up to you to interpret. I don't want to dictate to you, the viewer, what you're seeing and how it feels to you. To Julia, it felt like both. It looked like a reflection of the fields as you were looking, but also felt like it was underground. And I leave it up to the viewer to interpret that. I think it's important that we for me, not to fill in every detail, because I do want that gap, that space between me and my painting, and between the painting and the viewer, for there to be their own, to insert their own lives. What your experience is how you see things. You can't help it. So I want to keep it open, and I hope that maybe this kind of conversation can carry on at Plein Air Easton as to what is quote unquote acceptable. Even if it's not the norm.
We've always very much left that up to the artists, which some people wish we had a firmer stance. But I think it is up to you guys to define what the trends are and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. You know, we are the stewards for creating the opportunity, but you guys are responsible for defining what the art movement should do.
Right.
And certainly the buying public feeds into that too. But
right.
You know, I think that is up to the artists. So you were told maybe once when you were small, and then once by your inner self, that you were not an artist. Can you say confidently now that you are one?
I introduce myself as an artist because, you know, I think you have to believe in who you are for others to believe the same. If you can't speak up for yourself, who will? You know, I know I have a lot of good friends who will, you know, happily promote me and tell their friends about me and who I am. But I say, I know there's this question: are you a painter? Are you an artist? What's the difference? I was like, you know, I don't get hung up on terms. It's like, I feel very strongly that you should do whatever you want to do. And if it means you mash bananas on your painting, fine. That's what you want to do it, you know? You know, who's to say that is not you or your art? That is you. It's all part of you. It became you the minute you thought about getting a banana to mash on your painting. So
we're not encouraging you to mash bananas. Just for the record, that is not. I have a personal aversion to bananas in general, so that does not resonate with me. But you're right. If it speaks to you,
what do you not have a personal aversion to, food wise?
Well, I like a lot of foods.
Well, name one.
Name
one.
Name a fruit.
Steak.
Yeah, sure. Steak.
Can you put steak on your thing?
Yeah, I can do it. She said I have the freedom to do whatever I want.
Yes.
All right.
May, what's next for you? I see you're in Wisconsin with no sleeves on in November, which is not typical. So the plein air painting season for most people is over. The competition circuit is done. What is on your horizon?
I had an epiphany that following plein air and a few other obligations, I sort of said, you know, I want to feel this. I don't want this circle of art to keep tightening around me. I want to unmoor, and I want to unmoor from too many other obligations. I just want to carry on my learning, because that's really what brought me to your doorstep, was allowing myself during the pandemic to explore with paint, and I thought I would do some abstraction just to loosen my hand, but I didn't realize that I'm actually pretty good at abstract art at one end, and then at realism, and then in between. So I am allowing myself the freedom to unmoor and simply do what comes naturally. So do I hope to come back to Easton? Yes, it would be really nice to see you guys again. And I had a wonderful host, Rich Carroll, this past year. I would hope to see him again. But I don't want to place any parameters around myself. So I'm experimenting with some collage, and I'm building some little things. I just came back from a workshop with Carlos San Milan of Spain, where it's a very loose and bold paint application. So there's a lot of composting.
Yeah.
I need to do this winter, along with everything else around me that's composting. I need to take that in and just allow myself to breathe and do whatever I want. You know, I think the more we try to narrow ourselves, the more we're restricting our mindset but also our abilities to look in other rooms as we're traveling down. So, and I'm grateful I could do that.
Do you think that you'll even recognize the art that you're making now in 3 years? Who knows?
Who knows? I will tell you that the person who started on those little, birds in watercolor was so concerned with coloring within the lines and not making mud. And then 2 weeks ago, I learned that you can make beautiful mud and let it sing. And so I'm like, you learn something every day. So I'm opening myself up to all kinds of inspiration and to learning what other artists do, other masters, but also just what other artists like myself are into. So no, I mean, you might not recognize me next year. Who knows? If you let me in.
Well, I wish I was the one, I've always said that I wished I was the jurist. I would make all kinds of choices, but I'm never the jurist. I guess
for the record, May does not care if she gets in or not.
No, I don't.
I got you.
But we hope to see her again. We hope to see her again.
No, that's the life of an artist. Individually, everybody has their own sort of thing, right?
Yeah, I just want to. I'm grateful that I've been given this second chance to discover art, let art discover me. And, who knows, I could be one of those, grannies on the street who are, well, ill-behaved, but, now art keeps me on the straight and narrow within the studios in the home. And it's just given me so much.
Is that the gratitude that you wanted to speak to? Like, as we close, you said that you wanted to make sure that you included some gratitude. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you feel grateful that despite the fact that your artistic prowess got tamped down, that you have found your way back.
Yes, I want to never forget that. This is every day you get a chance to paint or do what you love. Be grateful for that. Look at it as a gift, because there are people who didn't get a second chance, or there are people who don't know what to do with their lives beyond a certain description, their jobs or whatever. And being able to be given the gift to rediscover another part of yourself, and to see that there's this openness. But also I'm really grateful for all of the people that helped me along this journey, and all the people I met, all the 3 seconds they gave me, to tell me about things. It really means a lot, and I hope that I live long enough to give back, to the community that's given me so much. So,
thank you, May. That's really nice.
Very nice. I almost hate going back to my job now after this interview.
Well, on that note, I'm going to make Tim go back to his office.
They're selling a lot of beer out in Milwaukee at Lakefront, I can tell you that much.
Yeah. Come on down. It's good. Black Friday will be crazy, and we will have lines of people, but we'll look forward to that. And so we're grateful.
I made light of it, May. It's a wonderful message, and I hope everybody heard that, because it was very very special.
In this time of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we'll run this Thanksgiving. Yeah,
we're gonna earmark this as the Thanksgiving episode starting now. May, this has been terrific. Thank you so much for your time and for your friendship. We certainly hope that our paths cross again in the future.
Likewise.
Awesome. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Much love.
The Plein Air Easton Podcast is brought to you by the Avalon Foundation and was produced by Nick Richards. Our theme music was generously provided by Blue Dot Sessions, with additional episode music by Poddington Bear. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. You can learn more about Plein Air Easton at pleinaireaston.com.